When you're logical, you are really just looking at what's already out there and you're saying, how can I be a tad different than what it is that people are seeing? You may not be overtly saying that to yourself, but that's what you're saying to yourself. So what you come up with will be like some pale version of what already exists. It'll be 1 or 2 percentage points to the right or left. Like if someone has like an item that's red, you'll make your item blue and you'll say, I'm differentiated. I have the blue one. It's like, okay, that's not really about standing out or differentiation.
Mark, it is just absolute pure joy to have you here on The Conscious Investor. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm grateful that you invited me.
Oh man, it's the best. And it is time. We have to start with the question of all questions because Conscious Investor, I know you're always curious like myself. So Mark, I know your background, but the Conscious Investor does not. What do you do and how on earth did you get started?
Okay. So I am a differentiation expert. So I differentiate organizations, brands, and thought leaders around what I call is their big, sexy idea, the signature idea, the idea that they're going to be known for throughout the world. And I make sure it comes through loud and clear in everything they do, like their web copy or speeches they give and so forth, so that anyone in the world who falls in love with that idea has to seek my client out because they embody that idea. They represent that idea in people's minds. If you tried to get that idea from someone other than my client, you'd be getting a diet version of the idea, a stinky, flat, lousy version of the idea. I have worked with people. I've worked with large organizations. I've spoken at large organizations like Google and Adobe and American Express and so forth. But I'm perhaps best known for Simon Sinek of Start With Why fame. So 15 years ago, I'm bad with dates, but however long ago, 15 years, 17 years, something like that. When he was not known, I worked with Simon, and it's while we were working together that he brilliantly came up with Start With Why and the Golden Circle and Inspire Action and all those things. But I've also worked with the former head of the strategy unit at the Harvard Business School. I've worked with the CEO who turned Popeyes around. I work on TV shows. Some of your listeners may know the show Mystery Science Theater 3000. So
Such a great show.
Yes, thank you. One of my dearest friends is Joel Hodgson, who's the creator of that show. So, another important point to know about me is that I am a business strategist, so I differentiate things. But in particular, there's a couple of reasons why I am so good at what it is I do. And one is that for 14 years, I was the director. I was the head of sales for the third largest book wholesaler in the world. So we would buy millions of dollars worth of books from Random House, Simon Schuster, Doubleday, and others, and then we'd sell them over the phone to bookstores and buying offices. And I helped them sell over $1 billion worth of books. And so over the course of 14 years, I must have pitched books over 25,000 times. And so it's not like I'm so talented. It's that when you get that many reps in on what it is that you're doing, you learn a few things about what draws people in, what pushes them back, why they say no, why they say yes. So I did that a lot. And then the final thing I will say here about my background is I also have a background, as you know, as a magician. I have created magic tricks and shows and illusions that have been on television, streaming, off-Broadway, Las Vegas stage, all kinds of things. The highest rated live show in New York City on TripAdvisor, rated higher than even Hamilton, is my show that's run for 24 years that I co-created called Chamber Magic. So when you're a magician, you understand a lot of things about how to communicate to the world. So one thing you know is that subtlety doesn't work. That if you're too subtle, it'll fly right by people. They won't even process it. It won't even be caught in their filter or anything. So you need to be a bit bigger and bolder than you are being in order to get noticed. And another thing, if I may, to go into something we were talking about before, is the idea that magicians understand that staying too close to pure logic in your messages and things like that, in your positioning, hinders you more than helps you. That it's essential that you become a little illogical in what it is you're doing. Example of that. So when you're logical, you are really just looking at what's already out there and you're saying, how can I be a tad different than what it is that people are seeing? You may not be overtly saying that to yourself, but that's what you're saying to yourself. So what you come up with will be like some pale version of what already exists. It'll be 1 or 2 percentage points to the right or left. Like if someone has like an item that's red, you'll make your item blue and you'll say, I'm differentiated. I have the blue one. It's like, okay, that's not really about standing out or differentiation. That a colleague of mine, Rory Sutherland, brilliant marketer in the UK, Rory says, he talks about the same thing. He says that when you are too logical, you rob the world of its magic. When you're too logical, you become predictable and hackable. That everyone can predict what it is that you're going to do and what you're going to say, and they can do end runs around you. So it is absolutely essential. And he cites people like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel of PayPal, James Dyson of the Dyson vacuum, regardless of what you think about them as people, but about how they approach business. As Rory says, that no, they are seen by the world as quote unquote certifiably bonkers, that what it is they do would never be okayed by a committee. So it is essential that you go off track in order to stand out. I know that was, forgive that long-winded answer, but I'm a keynote speaker, so I'm used to speaking for an hour.
Well,
so I apologize.
There is zero apologies whatsoever, ever, Mark. As I'm like looking at copious notes I took the first time I heard you speak in person, it was like someone opened the floodgates and I could just receive this download of powerful information. It's such a gift. It's so interesting because, you know, people try to differentiate themselves, to your point of, in the subtle ways. I'll wear a skirt, but not pants. I'll wear this, but not that. But, it's like, it's not really true differentiation.
Right. Right. Those things help. I mean, they're super cool, but you really need to be differentiated around an idea that's important to your audience. So an example, and I'll give this. I was not involved in this whatsoever, but I like to point to simple examples. So there was a very famous delicatessen in New York, monstrously famous. It may have closed because of COVID, I'm not sure, but they were around for years and they were mega famous. And what they would do is that they would serve you, you'd order a sandwich, and they would bring you a sandwich that was a foot high, like pastrami and, like all this stuff. And it was a foot high. Now, no one needs to eat a foot high sandwich. It just doesn't serve any function. It's not good for you. It's not going to taste good after a while as you're eating something that tall, like it's just not. But they really didn't serve a foot high sandwich for that reason. They served it from a differentiation standpoint, because when at first you're anticipating that this thing is going to come out, like you're very excited because the reputation of this place. And then when it comes out, everyone in the restaurant looks, oh my God, what do they have? then you put it down, and everyone's taking pictures. They're writing about it, tweeting about it. They're doing like all kinds of things, but also food, eating in a restaurant. Really, the reason to eat in a restaurant, unless you're on the go and you're working, it's really for social reasons, right? You don't usually, it's
Absolutely.
purely, unless it's the middle of the day and you're grabbing a slice of pizza or something, it's for a social reason. So, food is this great social bonding situation. It's the great thing to bond around. So now you have something to talk about with the person you're with. And also they have their giant sandwich. So there's all kinds of things to talk about. And people from other tables lean over and start talking to you and you have conversations going. And so that would be an instance when I say you need to differentiate about something that's important to your audience or so. I'm not saying that you need to be splitting the atom. I'm just saying, given the field you're in, why are people there, and how could you stand out in a way that's a signifier for why you're there?
I'm lost in thought because you always get my gears turning in a whole different direction, Mark. Every time I listen to you and we talk, I'm just like, okay, wow, right. And it's easy to start going down the rabbit hole of wonder and curiosity to say, okay, wait, how am I doing that with a conscious investor? How am I doing that here and there? And it's interesting because it is so imperative to have that differentiation. How did you, I do want to know, like, specifically, how did you find yourself at this point where you are an expert on differentiation? Like, you have done it. You have created you are exactly what you said. Like, you are, the top shelf. Like, if people aren't, going to you for expert advice on differentiation, then they're getting flat hot
bad.
soda.
Right, exactly. When someone doesn't come to me, I feel bad. I say, oh, they just screwed up, man. Yeah.
Right. But how did you find yourself after, all the years, selling billions of dollars of books and such? Like, what was it that allowed you? What did you see in yourself that allowed you to transition?
I didn't, in such a calculated way, do that. This is a story I never tell, but you're so.
I'm so curious.
A beautiful question. It is years and years ago, I was working for the book wholesaler that I worked with. And I wanted to transition because I had gone as far as I possibly could there. I wanted to go to another kind of business. And I didn't know what that business would be. But I'm also a writer. I've written for the New York Times. I've written and blah, blah, blah. I taught writing at Rutgers. I'm a writer. So in passing, I wanted to start, this will all tie together. I wanted to start doing a different kind of magic show for people. And so I called a very famous mind reader, a magician, right? A faux mind reader, and who was selling certain products, like mind reading kind of products. And I called him and I just said, oh, my name's Mark Levy, and I'm very interested. And we had a nice discussion, nothing too deep. And I hung up. The next day, I got an email from this guy whose name was Larry Becker. He unfortunately died, I think, last year, an older gentleman. And Larry Becker's email to me said, I apologize. I didn't know who you were. He said, I looked you up after speaking. And at that point, this was 20 odd years ago, but I had written Accidental Genius, a book of mine that was a kind of a mini bestseller and so forth. And it ended up that he had a friend of his who wanted to write a book. And he couldn't find the right writer. And so he wanted to put me together with this friend. And we ended up writing a book, Joel Bauer, How to Persuade People Who Don't Want to Be Persuaded, which was a bestseller on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And so anyway, the reason why I'm telling you this whole story is it always stuck with me that in my field, Larry Becker was very famous. Like, you know what I mean? He was famous in my field. And to have him emails me and begin an email saying, "Forgive me, I didn't know who you were." And so that kind of thing, I realized that, wow, Mark, you got to get it. Because I had written this book that was a bestseller. But like, you have to get over your fear or anxiousness at self-promotion and things like that. Because I would never tell people about anything that I did. And now, by the way, when I'm differentiating people, that's why I kind of tell them you need to be about an idea or something, because it's a little obnoxious to talk too much about yourself. So I still feel that way a little, but I'm much more able, and I teach people, how to work a room. That some people think that when they go around, let's say they're at a conference or an event, that they want to meet people and they want to understand who the people are and sell to the people. It's that if you lack confidence, it just means you have shitty material.
I love that.
Yes. Because someone once came to me and said exactly that. I'm going to this conference. I have a multi-million-dollar business, but I hate to sell. I have to go around, blah, blah, blah. And I said, tell me what you would say if I was a potential client of yours. How would you introduce yourself? And he introduced himself to me, include his elevator speech and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, because he came to me, he said, I want you to bolster my confidence because you strike me as the most confident person I've ever seen. So I said, tell me what you would say at these things. And he told it to me. I said, here's the good news. You are justifiably unconfident you do not have to repair your confidence whatsoever. Like zero, no reason to. I said, if I said to important people what you just said to me, I would be not confident as well. And like, there's a reason for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on your material, not on your inner workings, not on your confidence or so. So it's this idea of, in speaking to the people in your audience, about how to differentiate and how to go about and like work a room and so forth. You really need to get honest about the true value that you offer people, because that's probably where your point of differentiation is going to be. Like, I'm often at an event and people will come up to me and they'll say something. I'll say, who are you? Like, I mean, and you met me at an event. I'm very nice. So I'm saying that I'm sounding like I'm Frankenstein's monster. I'm not. I'm a very nice guy. So like, I'll say, oh yeah, what do you do? And if they give me some kind of corny, I'm a Sherpa for finance, like I go, oh shit, man. Like, may not say this aloud, but it's like, oh my God, how quickly can I get away from this person? It's like, because to me, they're not treating me like a human being. They're treating me like a potential sale. And I'm not interested in you selling to me. I asked you what you did. I didn't ask you to sell to me. You know what I mean? It's the same. I just did this last week with a client. We're preparing their sales staff, multi-billion-dollar manufacturer, for a trade show. And I said, what would you say if someone was passing by the booth? And one of the people asked a question, like they did a question. I said, like, here's what I'd say. And I won't say it for non-disclosure reasons, but like it was a question that was going to lead into the presentation. And I said, if I was walking by and I slowed down to ask what you did or so, and you said that to me, the very next thing I do is be taking a step away from you. I might answer your question as I was leaving. And because again, you need to, in one of the important ways to differentiate is you need to treat human beings like human beings. Like you can't treat them as transactions or as things to get, does that make sense?
Oh gosh, you are a living, conscious investor. I met Mark at an event, and all of this is so true. And you're such a magnificent role model at being so human. I mean, this is one reason why I've just been drawn. Like, my gosh, you're so grounded and kind. And what was really amazing to me was the amount of presence you showed to every single person that was at the event. It was just you are extraordinarily accomplished in everything that you do. And so some people that have, had your achievements might be like, oh, well, I don't have time for that. I'm too tired, like next time. And here you were just, no, how can I help? Oh, what's this idea? Tell me more. And you asked, like you sat there and asked all of us at different points in the room. Like you just see, Mark's asking, and you just like have such genuine presence about you. It was extraordinary.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think it comes from, and maybe I'm mistaken saying this because I think we tell ourselves lots of stories. So, but I'll tell you the story that I think is where it comes from, is that I just, especially being a magician, I kind of walk around and look at the world very, very closely because everything could be useful, like in a trick or so. Right. Like a tree, I'm looking out my window, a tree bark. There's like everything. And so to me, everything has value, and that includes people. And so I find it very insulting when someone doesn't treat a person as a unique individual. I genuinely do. I mean, I get livid. Like if someone is dismissive of someone else, I mean, unless that other person who's like deserves, unless they did something that's obnoxious, then like, yeah, go ahead. Like be dismissive of them. I'm from New York, man. Like you can be as dismissive as you want to them. But like to just assume that everyone is the same is, to me, it doesn't just rob people of their humanity, but it robs you of an appreciation of the world that's necessary in order to move the ball forward in the world. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It resonates with me. I enjoy connecting with humans because they're so absolutely fascinating. And to your point, like you just never know what that exchange is going to be. Like, oh, in a conversation, you create something together. You are co-creating something. It's like, oh, I like, to me, it's that discovery of what are we going to discover in this conversation that's going to serve both of us or do something greater in the world, if only to bring joy. Like that's enough. But it's so interesting to me and exciting.
Right. Oh, right. Well, another important idea when you're, and I mean, you embody this, is the idea of you should always be looking for what's important to them first, or what can I give them first? It's always because you talk about connection. So in order to connect, you really have to understand who they are. So that's really an important part of what it is I do, that I listen to people closely, and then like I'll talk to them about, I'll tell them a few ideas if they're open to it about things that I saw. I'll just drop them in if this sounds very
Uh-huh.
like calculated or manipulative. It's not. It's just a natural appreciation of the world. It's like,
Right.
oh, so from what you said, this was so cool and blah, blah, blah. And did you ever think of this? And so, and invariably, not always, but a lot of the time, people say, oh my God, what do you do? And then, but by the way, if they don't ask me what I do, I sometimes never even say what I do. It was like just a nice conversation then. Like it was a good conversation. And I got to learn some things about the world and about this person that I didn't know ahead of time. Because to me, these interactions, they're never lost. One of a person whose work that I like very much, Roger Schenck, who Roger died a couple of years ago. He was a very prominent figure in AI. He was, I think, he set up the AI department in Northwestern, and he was at Yale and so forth. So Roger had said, he said, he said, I teach machines how to think for a living. Here's what intelligence is. He said, intelligence is you pack your mind with lots of cases. In other words, it means you pack your mind with stories, ideas, insights, like experiences. You do a lot of living in a lot of different ways. And then when you see something new in front of you, you say, what does this remind me of? Right? That's in my head.
Mm.
And that's what intelligence is. He says, that's what I teach machines to do. And so the simplicity of that, he had said that like in the late 80s or so. The simplicity of that is just so important to me that nothing is ever lost. And I mean that in a literal way, because if you live something, it could always be there to help you later on, even if nothing happened in the moment. It's
Mhm.
always like waiting there for you to draw upon it for some insight.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that. And in my mind, I'm literally going back through my intelligence, like, yeah, that's so true.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah. Well, when I speak, I mean, you and I have spoken a lot. Like, all I'm really doing is like, I hear what you say. I listen very, very closely, and then I say what it reminds me of, essentially, like from different domain, non-obvious things. Non-obvious.
they are, and it's such an eclectic spectrum, and there's so much to that. I want to ask you, I want to go back a little bit.
Sure.
And I want to ask you a personal question that relates to all of this, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned that you didn't see yourself that, in a particular way, and that you had to work past anxiety and in really develop the confidence and such. Like a lot of people struggle with that concept, and they kind of get stuck and they don't move past that point. Like, how is it that you were able to step beyond anxiety and into this new spectrum of life?
Oh, yeah. Beautifully said. And by the way, did I say that during our podcast or the hour
There,
before that we were speaking
it
about
no, it was during this
this
podcast
podcast? Oh,
episode,
okay.
and you were talking about after you'd been selling books, and you received, I think it was when you
Oh,
received that
gotcha.
email, and
Where
you had to shift, and you're like, wow, I don't see myself in that same capacity.
got it.
He's
Got it. It
saying,
was
I'm so sorry I didn't see who you were, and you were elaborating on just some of that.
right, right. That this guy who I idolized was saying, I had no idea who I was speaking to. It's like, oh my God. Like, so how did I get over this stuff? Um, uh, I guess a few answers. One is that I I know that you don't have to do most things perfectly.
Mm.
So, I mean, if you're like a brain surgeon or something, yes, you do. But in general, I remember years ago that I was taking a stand-up comedy course in New York City. and it was a couple of weeks long, and the final was on a Saturday night. I was performing at Caroline's on Broadway, which is, where Jerry Seinfeld played and all these people. So I had never been on, I'd never done comedy before. So I went to my teacher because he had office hours. His name was Stephen Rosenfeld. And I said to him how nervous I was. He said, "Oh, you have a brilliant set. Like, there's no reason for you to be nervous." I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Is it about like perfectionism?" And I said, well, like, I'm scared I'm going to forget a joke up there. I'll be so scared and so forth. And he said, "Look," he said, "I have seen people go on stage and give a quote unquote perfect talk or perfect set. And I've seen them not make a dent in anyone's consciousness, that no one was changed. It did zero. And they were perfect. It did zero." He said, "I have also seen people go on stage and be so nervous or like have things go wrong. I've seen them cry. I've seen them shake. I've seen them have to pull what it is they're going to say out of their pocket on a piece of paper. I've seen all those things. And I've seen those people kill where the audience loved them." So he said, this was the thing that it particularly impressed me. He said, now remember, we were standing in Manhattan. So he said, "It's like if I wanted to drive to Cape Cod for the weekend, right? Massachusetts. I wanted to drive to Cape Cod for the weekend." He said, "But I decided I want to drive to Cape Cod, but I want to do it without making a left-hand turn." What's not making a left-hand turn have to do with getting to Cape Cod? It doesn't. And so that's what Stephen said. And so I realized, I took from that we unintentionally sew in design parameters into what it is that we're trying to do that don't really need to be there. If that makes so.
That's so good.
When I'm going to do a keynote speech, and I've done keynote speech to thousands of people at a time, and I remember I used to be afraid of speaking, but now what I say to myself before I go out is I say, "I'm going to kill. I say, go in full power. You're going to kill. You're going to own the room. And what's more, you don't even have to be perfect to do it." That's what I say to myself. And then I go out and I do that thing. So it's like go in full power, like don't hold back. They're going to love you. And even if you screw up, like that has nothing to do with it. You can screw up, like go ahead and screw up. Anyway, that's to me an important thing about launching brands, differentiating, launching businesses, writing books, giving speeches, or whatever. You have to give yourself the permission to be human, which is doing it less than perfect. But you don't, it's not just giving yourself permission, it's actually then doing the thing. It's like you and I were talking, Julia, ahead of time before we came on, and you were talking about of your ability to go out and like just change things or so that need to be changed, like to launch tests to see what's right and what's wrong, because you can't know everything, right?
You can't know everything. No, I love that. I'm like all of this and Conscious Investor, the really exciting thing. There was a really powerful moment. There's so many moments when you and I initially met a few weeks ago and you were speaking, and then our conversation since, but the joy was given back to me. And that was like, so not only had I seen you carry yourself with such presence, right, the evening before, but then here we are talking about writing and the gift of joy, as you were talking about, you wrote, I'm looking at my notes, wanting to do it well and wanting to do it perfectly are different things. And to be able to just be released and to be able to say like, am I, I must be better after writing the book. I don't have to know it all. And so just to be able to live in that and to release from the perfectionism and from the box, from the, no, I'm going to Cape Cod and I'm not making left-hand turns, darn it. Like, why? Why would I do that?
Right,
Like,
right.
why not write your
Okay,
book
that's a
and have,
way, but why?
why? And so I seriously felt so like my writer's heart was resuscitated.
I
It was no
know
longer
that
scared.
was super cool. That was great to see. It's this idea. I think I quoted Mark Bowden from the Philadelphia Inquirer, the guy who wrote Black Hawk Down, who said a writer should always be working on the most important thing that they've ever done. So to me, when you're writing a book, if you just end up with a subset of what you already know, you will have failed. And that's because the book that you write is going to be hell for you to write. It's going to be tedious. And that tedium and that hell and that boredom is going to show through your writing, and your audience is going to be bored. So it is essential that your book, that you set out to have surprises for yourself in the book, that you learn in the book, that you stretch yourself in the book. Robert Frost, the poet, said, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. So I really go, oh, you have
literally
that
wrote that down. I was like,
right.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see how many surprises I can unearth in this process and how much growth I get to go through.
Right.
And we get to share this.
That's right. Like your book or your speech or the business that you're creating, like you want to on purpose push yourself to learn more. Like you don't have to be the expert of all experts on things, because there really is no such thing now. Yeah.
No, there really isn't. I love the concept of that freedom that comes, that liberation, and that we don't have to do things perfectly.
That to me, when I start to free write, I wrote a book, Accidental Genius, on free writing, on how to use journaling as a way of coming up with new ideas, unlike any ideas that you'd had before, and certainly way better ideas than you would get if you just sat there and thought about them. Because when we just sit there and think about things, our internal editors send us back to the same ideas, thoughts, and insights over and over again, the things that have gotten us far in the world. So in other words, these are the things that work. So your internal editor is trying to keep you safe. But if you want to come up with an idea unlike any idea you've had before, now your internal editor is going to keep you trapped, because it's not going to let you get to anything new. So the technique I teach in Accidental Genius helps with that. And now I forgot what I was going to say. What had you just said? But by the way, I'm not anxious about asking. Like, what was it you were saying?
Well, we were just talking about the freedom that comes with doing things. We don't have to have that perfection.
Oh, wrong. Oh, that's right. Because the technique, now remember, the technique in Accidental Genius, I so love to hear myself talk that I sometimes forget. The technique I teach in Accidental Genius, the writing technique, is often, not always, but often I begin by telling myself in the writing, I write this down, okay, you need to come up with an idea for X, like some business thing or whatnot. All right, this doesn't have to like change the whole world. Sometimes I will just begin my writing by reminding myself that it doesn't have to be spectacular. And someone listening might say, oh, no, my idea does need to be spectacular. Yeah, it does, but it probably doesn't have to be spectacular in any individual session of thinking or doing. Like you can go out there. I'll put it differently. Like Apple in 1987 didn't produce the iPhone 15. or whatever this thing is that I'm holding. I don't know all the thing, but you know what I mean? In 1987, they did not come out with that. Like that stuff didn't, the iPhone didn't exist, and certainly iterations of the iPhone didn't exist, and so forth. So it's the same thing with you. Why are you demanding more than Steve Jobs demanded of Apple? Like, they iterated over the years into improved stuff. Like, why would you demand perfection from yourself now? It's like, it makes no logical sense. I'm sure you have reasons, but they probably don't make a lot of sense.
They don't make a lot of sense. I think this is one of the, aside from writing, and I remember feeling like caged, like, well, if you're going to write this book, this body of work that you are going to create needs to be something profound and prolific.
Right.
And it needs to be like Ryan Holiday's new book. It needs to be on par with these other authors that you read and enjoy and value, in these thought leaders and such. It's like, why would I compare my first? I've started to step back since we met. It's sort of like, why would I compare my first body of work with somebody's, 10th, 7th, 8th body of work? Why do I need to? One, there's no comparison. Like, just don't compare. But
that's right.
Actually, I'd love to know.
Well, and by the way, Ryan Holiday, I think, I don't know his work that well, but I think his first book was like growth hacking.
Yep, it was.
You know what I mean? Like, so you could say, the guy got out there in ways that were very helpful to people, but then he started to transition what he was writing about to stoicism and things like, totally different field. They have nothing to do with one another. But like, he was in action. So he was able to come up with something interesting by being in action, right? So standing still is a very bad strategy.
Tell us more about that. That's something that I am a firm believer in, because I don't even think, like, if you're standing still, you're actually going backwards. So I think about, you're losing time. Time is continuing on, and that means you are actually going backwards, because time is going on, and because you're not taking any steps forward, you are going backwards in a sense.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I don't know that I could say it better, but I'll attempt to say something, just because I'm sitting here and we have we're being recorded. You
have insight. You always say, I'm like, no pressure, no pressure, left turn, left turn.
Oh, no, I never feel pressure.
I know you don't.
I feel no pressure.
That's my sarcasm.
I think I told you this. I'll be waiting to get up on stage with X thousands of people in the audience, and I'm waiting on the side to be introduced. And as they start to introduce me, I'm talking to people in the audience, like whispering them, saying like, blah, 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 blah. And then I have to go, oh, excuse me, I'm on now. And then I have to run up on stage. Like, I'll talk to people up to like 12 seconds before I'm on stage. Doesn't matter to me. So you would ask your question again.
About being in action and the importance of being in action in any capacity.
So there's two things I'll say. So one is, you're 100% right that if you're not in action, then the world continues on without you. So things change, things develop, things evolve. And you were not in drumbeat with that. Like, you don't know what's been happening. But then even more insidious is perhaps, if you don't take action, if you don't move, then you have no way of testing out what's right or wrong anymore. So you become calcified in certain ways of being, you're like covered in amber. You can't move. It's like Pompeii. You're frozen there with what it is that you had when you stopped.
I've never considered that. I love that you're like, I don't know if I can add anything to this. And then it's like, wow. Yeah. Oh, that's so accurate. And then you're just stuck.
Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Wow. Have you ever, I think I know the answer to this, but I don't like to make any assumptions at all. Have you ever found yourself like calcified or in a part of life where you're like, I'm just not taking action?
Oh yeah,
And if so,
for
what
sure.
did you do?
Oh yeah, I for sure have. I mean, I think everyone has had. So sometimes I feel so calcified and not taking action, and I don't know what to do. So what I do is I admit to myself, you don't know what's right, what you should be doing right now. So just start taking any action, even a minor action, just to start seeing the world differently. And I'll give you an example of exactly.
Yeah.
Um, I like to do urban exploring, like I visit abandoned mental institutions and abandoned amusement parks and historical sites and things like that, because I had consulted to a special on the History Channel. So I love history. So, like, I go off to try to, and I talk to people, like strange people, I love it. So, once I had run out of places to see, which is a stupid thing to say, or so I thought. And so I said, but like was depressed about it. And then so I said to myself, like depressed into inaction.
Wow.
So I said to myself, uh, what is the simplest thing that you can do? Is what I asked myself. And so at the time, I lived in Morristown, New Jersey, which is a beautiful town in northern New Jersey, colonial kind of town. Um, so I said, well, the simplest thing I could do is if I've run out of things to see in like out in other towns and in like other states near me, well, the simplest thing would be to look around my own town. And then I thought, oh, I've never been on every street in Morristown. Maybe there's something on some streets in the town, my hometown, the town I'm living in, that I may not know about. So I went to the web and I said street names in Morristown, New Jersey. And instantly it returned me in alphabetical order, a list of all, like First Street, Second Street, Third Street, Abbott Street, da 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 da. And so the first thing, I just got in my car almost immediately, and I went to First Street and looked around, driving still in my car. And then I drove to Second Street and Third Street, and I discovered I aborted the plan the way I had originally drawn it up pretty quickly, because I realized that I was doubling back. Morristown's big, and I was doubling back over and over again, like Abbott Street might have been across town, and you know what I mean? And I should have seen some other. So I changed it as I was going to just drive down every street in the town as I came to them. Even if I thought I knew, like they were developments, even if some of them were developments, don't assume that every street, maybe it's someone's that would have a sign up in front of theirs, or some statue, or a party was going to be going on. Like, do not assume you know what's going on down these streets, even though they look identical. And I was assuming that before. And so I found like super cool ruins of a factory from like 80 years ago. Like I just found like all this super cool stuff. And it was just this idea of, I don't know what to do. So what's the simplest thing I could try? Like embarrassingly simple.
It's powerful. It actually goes with you often say, what do I know that they don't know? But it's
Oh
almost
yeah.
like it's almost like a flip of the question of like, okay, well, what does the world know that I don't know, in a sense of what do I need to learn about this that is like the simplest, basic, most like I can just step out my door and get started on this.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. So one of the ideas that I'm very well known for is this idea of, I ask my clients, what do I know that they don't know? if you're creating a business or a speech or a book or so. Because if you only tell people what it is that they already know, they have no reason to listen to you. So it's essential that you jolt them with ideas, insights, stories, exercises, things that you know that they don't know. So whenever I sit down, I always say, who is it who I'm speaking to? What am I going to be speaking to them about? Now, what do I know that they don't know? And so what it is I hear you beautifully saying back is this idea. It's like, what does the world know that I don't know? Like going out there saying, right, right. I love that. Well, and I think an important part of this, as I said, is it's accepting the fact that at times you don't know what to do next. But I know that uh, 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 I know that standing still is not the way. Is not. Years ago, I read everything I do is years ago. That's because I'm old. I never say, oh, 2 days ago. Years ago, I was reading a book by a therapist whose work I liked. His name was Sol Gordon. And so I had read a few of his books, one about love and so forth. He wrote these books. And so I said, oh, what other books does he have? And he had a book for teenagers. It was Preventing Suicide. It was written for teens on if you're feeling suicidal, like this is the book to read. And it was like in big type and so forth, because, it's hard to focus and so forth. So I bought that book, even though it's far from a teenager. And I was reading it, and there was something there that I so took to heart. That Sol Gordon, I'm trying to see if I have the book here. Sol Gordon said, if you're really, really depressed, of course, you want to seek help, right? This is not instead of help. But if you're really, really depressed, go out and learn something new. That's like like an antidote, at least temporarily, for depression. Who knows? Again, seek help. Don't take this as medical advice.
Right.
But I'm just saying, for me, I will often say, like, let's say I'm going somewhere on business and I don't know what to do or whatnot. Like I say, okay, what can I learn here that's new? Like, where can I go? But that's an overt instruction. I'm not saying this to make me seem like some wise person walking around. It's like, oh my God, I don't want to sit here. Like, what can I go learn? You know what I mean? It's like very much. Yeah.
Well, that's very much in tandem with the question I asked you when we first met and were in conversation. I asked you the question. I said, you go and attend a lot of events.
I do.
What is it that you are most excited about with this event? What is it because at some point, I go to a lot of real estate investing events. And so at some point, is there a blur between all of it? But that enthusiasm, that curiosity, that wonder of discovery was very clear, and that was communicated back to me.
Oh, yeah. Well, because again, it's like going down streets I thought I knew. Like every person was kind of like a street. And it's like, yeah. Pay attention here. What do you, I once, a couple of friends of mine, a husband and wife, and I once went on one of these urban exploring trips. We went to like a deserted outdoor theme park. It was an animal safari. Like,
oh, wow.
Which had now been overgrown with the giant part, that it was a big animal safari in the 70s and 80s. And then it shut down. So we went hiking through it, trying to find, like ticket huts and things like that in the middle of what was now a forest type of thing. And anyway, after we were finished, we had dinner. And we had promised the young lady and I, she'd said, we used to do this growing up. She said, keep track of the details that you see. And then tonight at dinner, let's quiz each other. which by the way, I've seen another friend of mine do, which I loved. But it was the idea. So we sat down, and while eating dinner, like I would say to her, okay, in the theme park, how many electric outlets are still there in the theme park as we in this safari, right? Because it was this, like there were still some things that I'm sure they were non-functional, but they were still there. And it was, oh yeah, what did the sign say when we saw, like the whatever the old hippo exhibit, like what did the sign say to the left? Like, and we quizzed each other, but we knew that we were going to be quizzed, so we paid extra attention during the day to
Wow.
things. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of, you can give yourself like little, like
Little
little
assignments,
games,
the
little
little,
games to play. It's like, what can I mean, that's how I learn half the stuff. Um, um, the other day, my wife and I saw the Russell Crowe film, The Exorcism. And so instantly, as I do with stuff, I was, after we saw it, we spoke about it. I was reading all the reviews. I'm like reading a book now on The Exorcist. I'm like all this stuff. And my wife said to me, you can't just see a film and leave it alone. And it's because to me, the film is just like the spark, like it's just the tinder. It's just the spark. Like if the film was any good, it's going to send me down the rabbit hole as
uh-huh.
if I don't want to research about the film and what the film's about and who the director is and all these things, then it was a bad film. You know what I mean? The film is just the very first spot.
I love that.
Well, and it's about everything. Like, it's like, I know a lot about dinosaurs, right? I have a dinosaur picture hanging on my wall. And one of the first things that you would say, Julie, is what dinosaur is that? Why do you have it hanging? And I told you this very detailed story about the dinosaur. It's the Hadrosaurus. It's the dinosaur that allowed us to know that there had been dinosaurs. It was the most complete dinosaur skeleton ever discovered. It was in the 19th century in Haddonfield, New Jersey, which is why it's named the Hadrosaurus. And before that, people would find dinosaur bones and they'd say, oh, that's from a hippo, that's from a dragon, that's from a race of giants who's extinct. They had all these theories, but it was the Hadrosaurus that allowed paleontologists of the time to say, no, this is the proof. This is real. And it was the first dinosaur ever mounted and shown. It was shown in Philadelphia. So it's like, that's what allowed for Jurassic Park, so, but you enter a subject from one small door and you let it fan out in a multiplicity of ways. And you know that everything that you're learning, that nothing's ever going to really be lost because you're always going to be able to use it later on when you look at something else and say, what's that remind me of? And you never know where that day where you did quote unquote nothing because you didn't you went somewhere you never know when it's going to pay dividends down the line. It might make your fortune. This thing that you, in your mind, you cataloged as being a nothingness suddenly comes back to you, and that's where you're going to make your fortune from.
And it comes together.
Right.
Mark, I love this because that goes back to, even when we were talking about engaging people and when you're around people and listening closely and sharing honestly, like it really takes that takes this full conversation, like full spectrum, right? And there's always more in a conversation, but to just like be able to internalize that, to look at intelligence as more than just I'm learning this rote thing, but to look at it as a precipice, like to your point, it fans out. It's so much more. It's the gateway. And the more we step down that, I love how it all gets interconnected. And there are all these connections between different concepts and topics that end up coming together at different points that I would never have seen if I hadn't continued to take action forward.
Right, right. Yeah. Always move, like if you stand still, you're dooming yourself to failure.
Absolutely. Mark, we have to wrap things up.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I value you, and your contribution is so substantial. And I deeply value how you allow my mind to just expand. And it's almost like I can feel it expand in real time of like, oh, I want to go down that
I
rabbit hole.
love
Like,
that.
yes, let's go. And wait, but now there's this other one. And and hence I love taking notes in conversation. Sometimes it's mental notes, or sometimes in proper settings, I'll write things down, but because it's there's insight there that's worth extracting more. There's more to be mined, and it's so exciting.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You're wonderful, and you're a wonderful interviewer. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I know that the conscious investor is always fascinated and loves to connect. You have amazing, accidental genius. Even if you are you don't view yourself as a writer, conscious investor. I have started free writing since you elaborated on this, and I
Cool.
have encouraged my coaching clients to free write and to adopt your practices. I can't believe some of the things that have come out of my own head. And I'm like, I never saw that. Like, the connection you make with yourself is so powerful. So you don't have to be a writer. Pick up to read Accidental Genius and to just start harvesting this beauty in your own life.
I
So
appreciate
you
that.
could, like, a super easy gateway.
I would say that free writing, which is the technique I teach in Accidental Genius, is the single most important thing that I've ever learned in my life. I don't think I know of anything more important than that. So yeah, thank you for that.
It's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And then if you're in New York at any given time, you need to head over and see the show. I'm like,
Chamber
oh my
Magic. I don't perform in the show. Steve Cohen does, but it's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant show. And it's run for 24 years. So yes, you would just go online to chambermagic.com. Yeah.
And the conscious investor, you might be looking for ways. You might feel that inner tug of, I'm ready to unleash my story. I'm ready to, see what my differentiating factor is. I'm ready to step into this full potential. I'm tired of being stagnant. I'm not going to be a little petrified piece of wood over here. I'm going to take massive action. And Mark works with extraordinary people, and you are extraordinary conscious investor. And that might be a powerful alliance for you in serving the world and contributing on scale in a very powerful way. So, Mark, if the conscious investor wants to connect up with you, what is the very best way?
Oh, sure. So my website is levyinnovation.com. That's Levy, then the word innovation with no S at the end, levyinnovation.com. And my email, which is on there, is Mark with a K at levyinnovation.com. So yeah, that would be great. I'd be happy to hear from people. Minimally, I love to hear people's stories. So I'd love to hear. I like to say, if you're devoting your life to something, I want to hear about it. Because that to me is more interesting than anything else I could be doing. If someone's devoting their life to something, man, I want to know what's up there, like why, and what's cool about it. So yeah.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Conscious investor, remember, it's absolutely free to support the show. If this conversation has inspired you, has challenged you, has led you down the rabbit hole of curiosity, take that free action of sharing this podcast episode with a friend or on your social platforms. If you really gain something great, we'd love for you to go and leave a review over on Apple Podcasts. Just scroll on down. You'll see the stars. You can rate it, but in little tiny purple words, they say, write a review. They make it very cryptic. So I know that anyone who's left a review has really, they've done some sleuth work. Click on that and you can write a review and let Mark and I know one of the takeaways that you had through this episode. Until next time, conscious investor, cheers to your health, mindset, and wealth.